better. Her phone was frozen up.
Oh.
It was perfect. You got frozen in the right place.
Okay, are we live?
Hey, you guys are good to start whenever you'd like.
Okay, well, welcome. Welcome to the Curriculum Committee for the Ridgefield Board of Education, and I welcome everybody, and I hope everybody's staying cool. And we have a few things to go on to talk about tonight, and I'll turn it over, of course, to the esteemed people who do the work every day in the trenches. And I think the first thing we're going to do is have a curriculum writing work update district-wide. And who is the person going to be doing that? Is that Ms.
I'll
Gillette?
start us off. Good
Okay.
evening, everybody. So tonight I'm joined by my two colleagues, Dr. Eric Gundel and Linda Johnson. Eric is the 612 Math Science Director and Linda is the Elementary Director. So we are going to share tonight all of the updates that our department has been working on in the last very few months. And there's one thing that we want you to notice as we're sharing these updates. These updates all center around two goals, and those two goals are equity and assured experiences. So as you hear us describe the different updates, you will recognize that those two themes will continue to be repeated across the different areas that we're sharing with you. And if you remember, Dr. De Silva shared these two themes when she presented her budget at the beginning of budget season, which was feels like a very long time ago, when she presented the budget for the 21-22 school year. So it makes sense that we are all aligned around the two goals of equity and assured experiences for all students in Ridgefield Public Schools. So the first thing that we're going to update you on is the PK-12 curriculum writing process that's been happening this spring and into the early summer. And this process that we're going to quickly talk to you about tonight is the focus of our presentation, our full presentation, next Monday night. So we are going to give you some highlights and open the floor for questions, but this is not our comprehensive presentation. So one of the things that was really important to us as we began this work, especially as newcomers, was to make sure that we had an opportunity to really study and get to know what was in place. And we have quickly found in our short time in Ridgefield Public Schools that a lot of good work has come before us and is continued as we've been here. So we do not ever want to be in a situation when we're not honoring the work of the really talented staff and teachers. So the first huge goal of ours was to make sure that we got an understanding of what work had already been done. The other thing that we wanted to do was to get all of the different curriculum documents in one place. And the unfortunate thing in a district when there's a lot of turnover, especially in my seat and Dr. De Silva's seat, is that different administrations come in with ways to organize and collect curriculum documents. I'm sure this committee remembers a program called Atlas that many districts bought around the country. Kathleen, you look like you recognize it. And we all learned how to write curriculum into it. But like any, I guess, data warehouse, what can happen is if you don't keep your subscription up, you lose the material that you wrote into Atlas. So our big goal was to make sure that in getting to understand what work had been done, that we could get everything in one place. So as you listen to some of these steps that we took this spring and what our big goals are, you'll see that that's part of the work, is making sure we can get everything in one place so that we can review and set goals both long-term and short-term. So number one goal, to develop a common understanding across departments about the process of curriculum writing at RPS across all stages and levels. So thinking from pre-K to 12. And as we said before, to honor previous learning and curriculum work. Number two, to support the departments in collecting and revising this work. And then three, which is so important and which I've learned from my work with Dr. Da Silva, is to make sure that we are supporting teams as they create living curriculum documents made for and by teachers. Because one thing that can happen sometimes is in the creation of documents, they're almost created for an audience that isn't actually the teacher. So we want to create materials that teachers and departments refer to across time. So what this looks like, what we did was we studied together, the three of us. We actually spent a little bit of time studying with someone who's an expert in curriculum creation. The three of us calibrated. We studied the work that had been done here before with teachers and with different departments. And we created a little introductory video of what that first stage of curriculum work would be. And like I said, it was really more about collection, reviewing, getting 6-12 departments together, and setting short-term and long-term goals. The next thing that we did was we created an updated Google Shared Drive. So like I mentioned before, curriculum documents were all over the place, and you cannot blame teachers, and we're not blaming teachers for this, because as the changes had happened over time, there was another shared drive created, but it wasn't fully implemented. So some departments were using it, some departments were not. So now we have one common drive, and next week you'll see how we created all of the templates and all of the folders for every single department. The other thing that we thought was really important was that we needed to create a easily accessible place for teachers to access that curriculum. So the three of us created a teacher-facing website, and we'll show you in more detail next week. But on this teacher-facing website, say a math teacher can go to the math page, click on their grade level or their course, and all of their curriculum documents will be there. So they don't have to click into the shared drive. The shared drive is just the storage. So if anyone leaves the district, we don't lose all of their work and their brain power, and they access it from the website, which is very pretty easy to click and easy to access. And by putting all of those documents in one place and asking teams to create short-term and long-term goals, we're really at the beginning of that work towards equity and assured experiences. Think about it, we have 6 elementary schools. Now to have all elementary schools going to one page to see their assessment calendar, to see their scope and sequence, and to access their curriculum documents, that's already helping align the schools and helping support alignment across the schools. Same thing for the 2 middle schools, and then for the high school across courses. So in a nutshell, I think I gave you an overview of the work that we've done this spring to really begin delving even further across all content areas into curriculum. Questions?
My question would be, is Atlas defunct?
I'm not sure, Linda, if it's still.
I can answer that. I can answer that the best I can, Kathleen. So first of all, good evening, everyone. So I did contact the company Atlas, and we're not able to access any of the information that we did put into Atlas. They have sort of what you would call an expiration date, and that expiration date has come and gone. So we're not able, to access that information. The good news is that we do have some of it on our public website. So if you were to go on to, Ridgefield Public Schools, the curriculum website that's posted there, we have a good amount of the work that was put into Atlas. So from what I understand, with, listening with our teachers, administrators, some of that work that was originally housed into Atlas was stored in Atlas for, teachers' use, district use, and then some of it was pulled up and out and put onto the curriculum website. But not all of it is on the curriculum website, unfortunately.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? So you see more about that next week. Okay. So the next thing we wanted to update you on was the curriculum work around the essentials. And we know that this is a priority area for the district. So we just wanted to continue to give you updates on the progress. So Linda's going to start us off, and then I'm going to add in.
All right, thanks, Corey. So I'm going to give you an overview of the work that's been happening across all of our areas, all of our essential areas with all of our essential teachers. And it's very similar to what Corey has already described. So very common goals. You know, we're working with teachers in the essential areas to make sure that they understand, have a common understanding of how to develop the curriculum and follow that same process that our content area teachers are using. So then we do have alignment and calibration between content area, classroom teachers, and also our essential teachers. So it's a very similar approach. We've also been collecting the current work, the current curriculum that's in place, and putting those into that shared drive that Corey described. And then from there, we'll set short and long-term goals around what work we'd like to do with the curriculum that we currently have. And then once again, making sure that we're creating living, breathing curriculum documents that teachers can access easily and that we can make revisions as needed. I'm not suggesting revising the curriculum, but there are times that we need to revise our documents, adjust resources so that they still align to the curriculum. But using a Google Drive and a Google website will make those documents what we like to call responsive teaching, responsive curriculum. So if we do need to adjust our curriculum resources to meet our student needs or adjust to a practice that we might want to shift, we have that set of living curriculum documents that are created for teachers by teachers. Our essential teachers will also be a part of that systematic way that we're sharing out the curriculum and resources with all teachers. So they will have a presence on the website that Corey described and that you will see next week. We will tweak some of our approaches so that they fit and what makes sense for essentials. You know, we might need to do a little adjustment for PE because that's what makes sense in our world of PE. Or we might need to do a little adjustment here with a document or the way we deliver something because that makes sense with visual arts. But again, we will make sure that we have a very similar process on the website and follow a similar process in terms of developing the curriculum. We're also working with our essential teachers around creating a clear vision of what they value in terms of teaching in that content area or that curriculum area. And then what we're also doing is asking our teachers to create a visual map to show with some sort of visual representation what courses, what classes are offered, you know, from PK all the way up through the high school. So for example, in music, we might have when are the recorders introduced? When do we start band, orchestra? And then what other types of courses are offered at the secondary level? And we're going to try to do that for all of our essential areas.
So really mirroring what the content areas do. Sorry, Linda. So just like in math, we always see the pathways in math, but when do we see a visual pathway for students in music or in art or in PE so that they have a sense of what it means to be a student who grows across those grades? What can they look forward to? What kinds of experiences or opportunities are there for a student who's very interested in one of these areas or just really enjoys it? That was it. Thank you.
That makes sense. I'll just add specifically in terms of elementary music. Actually, more than elementary music, it's been a kindergarten through 12th grade. We started initially with the whole team, and then we've been breaking into smaller groups of teachers. But we are working with Rick Sadlon, who I believe we've spoken with you about in the past. He's a former colleague who does work around curriculum development, and from what I've recently learned with many districts across the state. And he has met with our team twice now. And in addition to what we've already mentioned, he's been collecting data on student enrollment and retention in different courses, which will offer us assistance in setting those short and long-term goals that Corey mentioned. And of course, he's creating that roadmap of what music looks like, you know, from elementary all the way up to secondary. And then he's already started to develop a vision with the teams of teachers to represent what we value in terms of teaching music in our schools.
And the other thing that we're looking at in music, in thinking about equity, back to that theme that we've been holding throughout, is looking at the current pathway, which only provides targeted lessons in a specific instrument in 4th and 5th grade. After 4th and 5th grade, there are not opportunities for students to have small group lessons in an instrument. And that is actually not typical of other districts in our DIRG. And we believe that if we can figure out a way to do this without increasing FTE, that we would be providing equity to students who aren't able, or perhaps not as interested in music because they aren't able to get that practice time and that targeted instruction from a teacher in that specific instrument. Because imagine going all the way through middle school and up to high school, having to provide your own lessons. Some families are able to do that and some families are not. So we are looking at that as part of this work, thinking about those pathways, opening opportunities for all students. We're looking to see how we can make that happen, both at the middle school level and at the high school level. So that was music, and very similar, like Linda said, very similar progressions for art and for PE. So any questions about curriculum updates in those essential areas?
None. Anybody? Okay, we can move on to the focused on unfinished teaching and learning, I guess, right?
Okay. This is a big one.
I can imagine.
So I'm sure that all of you have heard from people in our field, in the newspapers, across the country, on the news, talking about learning loss. And we recently attended, we meaning the curriculum department, recently attended a professional development session from Doug Fisher, who's a professor of educational leadership at San Diego State University. He's a published author who's written many books for teachers and administrators over the years and collaborates with other similar educators whose work we have studied for many years. And one of the things that he did was really change our mindset. And instead of thinking about learning loss, one of the things that he challenged us to think about, and that was easy once your mind shifted, was unexpected learning. And really thinking about what unexpected learning did our students and our teachers experience this year. And when you start thinking about it from our roles, from other building-based administrators' roles, from teacher roles and student roles, it's really amazing to capture all of the learning that we did have this year that is perhaps not the same learning that we would have traditionally had. So what Doug Fisher pushes us to think about is how we rebound in the fall, holding on to that unexpected learning, and how we can perhaps teach some things differently based on the unexpected learning that we gained. And instead of learning loss, he also talks about unfinished teaching and unfinished learning. There was some teaching that we just didn't get to finish. There was some learning that kids just didn't have time to complete. So capturing all that in mind, that big introduction, leads us into a conversation about mathematics instruction and equity and support for any unfinished learning in mathematics, really looking right now in this conversation at K-9, kindergarten through 9th grade. So Linda's going to start talking a little bit about how this work looks at the elementary level, and then I'll take it to middle, and Eric will continue with the 9th grade.
Okay, so I'll jump in here. I'm going to talk a little bit about our MTSS system, our multi-tier support system, which has been in place in Ridgefield for a good number of years. So we will continue to rely on that system, that structure, to support us as needed with any unexpected learning, or unfinished learning that some of our students may have or possibly may not have. But as part of our MTSS system, as you very well know, we have one math specialist in each elementary school. And our math specialists provide targeted instruction on specific learning goals to students who are receiving intervention services because they have not reached benchmark. So through our process, through looking at different assessments, looking at performance on a day-to-day basis, we have that system in place where we say, okay, this is where we are expected students to be at. And we have students who reach those benchmarks, who exceed those benchmarks, and then we have students at times who don't reach the benchmark. So through our process, our students will work with classroom teachers to receive effective differentiated instruction, and then they may receive targeted instruction by their classroom teacher, and then as needed, move into that other tier of support by our math specialists. So what I'm going to talk about are the two primary resources, curriculum resources that our interventionists use to deliver that instruction to students who have not reached benchmark and are not able to reach that benchmark even after they've received that really solid differentiated instruction from classroom teachers or targeted instruction from their classroom teacher. So we have two intervention resources in place in mathematics. The first one has been in our district for a good number of years, and that's called Do the Math by Marilyn Burns. And so you may have heard about that curriculum resource intervention program along the way. The second resource we just adopted this spring, and that's called Bridges Intervention Program. So Bridges has a common core, a core curriculum program that classroom teachers could use in the general education setting, and then they also have an intervention program. So the one I'm speaking about is the intervention program. We adopted that this spring. We've been implementing it with students who are receiving support. Our interventionists went through a pretty comprehensive professional learning session from a staff developer from the company, and then they started using it to work with some of their students when it's appropriate, where it's appropriate. Both resources, Do the Math and Bridges Intervention Program, are scientifically research-based. They are research-based interventions. So, similar to what you've heard us talk about in our early literacy discussions at the Board of Ed meetings, what does it mean to be an SRBI program? It follows a very systematic scope and sequence. There are a series of lessons that are specifically aligned to that targeted goal that students are receiving intervention, receiving targeted instruction in. Super important, both programs follow a concrete pictorial abstract teaching and learning approach to support that conceptual understanding and computational fluency that we value greatly when we're teaching mathematics, whether we're teaching mathematics in our general education setting, special education setting, or an intervention setting. And another area that we value greatly is application of learning to word problems. And both resources have that. So students are learning skills and strategies, discrete skills, strategies to support those discrete skills. And then they have an opportunity to apply those skills and strategies to word problems, which of course makes learning relevant. And another great aspect of both programs is that they include a good number of games. And what we know about mathematics is that a super effective way for students to practice, especially independent practice of skills and strategies, is to play math games. Again, it builds relevance. And it's fun, and they really don't even know they're practicing because they're playing a game. And then I'll just tell you a little bit about the assessments that are involved with both of the resources. So of course, there's a structured approach to assessing students. Again, SRBI, scientifically researched. Each program comes with placement assessments. So those placement assessments help guide us in determining the appropriate goal and then the appropriate module to place the student in. Then once we've determined which module we think fits the learner or the learners, then there is a pre and a post module assessment. And then there's a series of lessons, and then every fifth lesson, there's a built-in progress monitoring tool, some type of progress monitoring activity. So it's very systematic a systematic check-in to say, okay, our student is progressing, or our student may not be progressing. So that will help us adjust instruction as needed. And then again, speaking about equity and making sure that we have assured experiences across our elementary schools, we did do what we call an inventory of resources this spring, where we checked in with our math specialists and our literacy specialists as well, to see what resources are in our schools. And we've been working on making sure that the same resources, whether it's these two programs that I just described, or math manipulatives, workspaces, mini whiteboards, those effective tools to learning mathematics, are in place across all 6 schools. And that's elementary math intervention.
Thank you. So the big things in elementary are the introduction of a new program and making sure that we have the equity across the resources. So we continued the same work at the middle school level. Same inventories were done. We're supporting the interventionists at the middle school level. The interesting thing that we've run up against is that both of the programs that Linda spoke about at the elementary level are not available at the middle school level. Do the Math used to have a 6th, 7th, and 8th grade intervention program. They no longer have it. So Eric has been working hard to see if we can find another resource that also fits all of the very detailed, high quality components that Linda talked about at the elementary level. We don't have to have a curriculum resource like that, but it is very supportive for an interventionist to be able to do those kind of targeted assessments and really provide a lot of practice in the area where there's a loss of conceptual understanding. So that is part of the work that Eric is working on now. The next thing that we looked at the middle school level was how we were using the teachers. There's one at each middle school who serves as an interventionist as a coach. That's very similar to what happens at the elementary school. And unfortunately, there wasn't always, the interventionist coach person wasn't always able to only do intervention and coaching, because occasionally they had to cover core classes. So when we're thinking about going into next year and really being supportive of teachers and making sure we are supporting kids as they rebound back with perhaps unfinished learning, it's a high priority for us to make sure that these highly qualified individuals who are specialists in both of our middle schools are spending all their time with students and then supporting teachers with students. There is a Title I teacher who is spread across both schools. So we've reallocated her time so that if we do have overages and need somebody to cover a core class, she is going to take on that work in addition to supporting the interventionists at both the middle schools. So really that's just a realigning and making sure that that we have one school-based person at each of the middle school really paying attention to the intervention program, to the criteria, supporting the teachers, and delivering that direct intervention to students. And thankfully, we also have Eric in this spot who's going to be working very closely with that team regularly to do so. So as we've been working in the middle school, some other things came up, especially there's a very talented math team, district math team. So Eric's going to take us through some of the work that we started moving along with the high school into 9th grade.
Thank you, Corey. So when we started looking at this, what we wanted to keep in mind was that algebra is like a fundamental skill that's required for almost all advanced mathematics. I always used to say when I was teaching calculus that calculus is easy. I could teach you calculus right now in under 5 minutes, but the algebra to do that calculus is what makes calculus challenging. And in addition to that, the head of the math department at the high school, Jeff Corbishley, he's actually studied our student data and found a direct connection between performance in Algebra 1 and performance on the SATs. So with both of these things in mind, we wanted to start our focus on math intervention at the high school level in Algebra 1, where we think we'll get, a lot of bang for our buck here. And in order to achieve this, we are working on the creation of an algebra lab which is going to provide targeted intervention for students who need additional support. And the really neat thing about this is that it's going to be coming from their actual classroom teacher. So not a separate person, the person who's in the room with them every single day, knows exactly what's happening in class, being the one who's providing them with that additional support.
The other interesting thing that we are going to continue to study at the middle school level as well is our students that are double, triple accelerating. We offer Algebra 1 in 7th grade. And while there definitely are students who can learn all those skills in 7th grade, we also want to make sure that our accelerated students aren't moving up into high school with only some of those algebra skills like in a solid foundation. I almost feel like we're back talking about PA again at the elementary level in reading, phonemic awareness. Algebra is the phonemic awareness moving into high school. So it's not only for kids that we recognize as struggling in math and pre-algebra that we want to pay attention to. We also just systematically want to make sure that our students that are taking algebra in 7th grade get that same core foundation that students who are taking algebra in 8th grade and in 9th grade get. So it's interesting, and perhaps when we have a more detailed report on this, Jeff Corbishley, the department chair of the math department, can share with us all of the data that he's looked at, because it's not just struggling students who have those foundational holes in algebra that he's seeing. Sometimes it's students who accelerate almost too fast that they aren't able to retain those concepts and then apply them as they move into Algebra 1, Algebra 2. Everything that I've heard from the high school, Algebra 2 is really the SAT. So if your algebra is not foundational, that will impact how you do also on the SAT, even if you perhaps were accelerated. So this conversation was just sharing with you an example of how we're looking at unfinished learning across the different levels, and then how we're just looking at existing systems and seeing what we can do to provide the equity and the assured experiences for all students. So happy to take any questions on that. Yay. Hi, Nora.
Hi there. So I just had one little question, but I wondered, aside from intervention, are you thinking that teachers in the regular ed classroom will plan to review concepts from the previous year as like a first unit, or will they begin with the first prescribed grade level unit next fall?
Eric, do you want to answer, or you want me to answer?
I can answer that. So from the research that we've been doing on this, unfinished learning, it's actually recommended not to go back and reteach, but to rather, incorporate it into your lesson. So if you're doing a lesson on, this topic, and that maybe there's some unfinished learning on it, that you target it right then and there, rather than doing like a unit at the beginning of the school year that kind of tries to hit a lot of things. You actually do it like in the course of the lesson where it's needed, rather than doing a big thing at the front of the year, if that makes sense.
Yep. Thank you.
The hope is that I guess the fear really is that if too many teachers reach back too far, then kids aren't able to progress forward. But again, that also highlights at all levels the need of the interventionist coach to support teachers in that work, because as easy as that is to say, I'm a teacher, thinking about actually doing that and being able to put those pieces together, that takes some work. So we need to make sure that we have enough time for co-planning across teachers who are teaching the same course, support at all levels, from the interventionist at the building, from Eric, from Jeff at the high school, from the math interventionists at the elementary level. So it's an easier concept to say than to do, but it's definitely our goal to use that advice from experts as we know that there will be some unfinished learning, and make adjustments along the way. Because we have MTSS in place and we have these assessments, we can see how we're doing and see if it's enough. We hope it's enough. as we're working through it.
Great, thank you.
The only thing I want to add is I really like the concept of unexpected learning. I
Yeah,
remember last March and April when we were talking, one of the group's wonderings was as we have to try a new paradigm shift and move into something that has not been done before, will there be silver linings? And I'm hopefully people will mine from them. And it looks like you're already beginning to look that way. So, I mean, not that it was a horrible thing that happened, but when you're doing that, you can look at new ways of thinking.
definitely.
I like that.
Tina.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to Kathleen, I totally agree, because there has been loss. And this is just something I'm observed. I think the loss, and I'm glad you're addressing this, there has been, I think it's been tougher for the kids who transition, if that makes sense, you know, the 5th grade into 6th and the 8th into 9th, because it's a totally different style of learning, core, math, everything. So I'm glad that you're talking about that. And this started even, you know, and it was in the time period, which was, I have a freshman who missed 3 months of math, you know, which is essential because, as you mentioned, algebra is so essential for what they're doing. So I'm glad that you're talking about it. I'm glad that you're addressing it, because there are some kids who probably adjusted it well back to school, but there's still kids who are there's a learning loss. They're still struggling. So thank you. I truly appreciate that you're talking about it. And yes, as a freshman at high school, I totally agree with the algebra. You know, my child, he's a math child, but I can see the difference when he's back in school, except there were certain pockets that he was struggling with, and you know, it's getting there. So I'm so glad you're doing that. So thank you. I just want to publicly say that it's great that you're doing this, because it's going to come up even more, I'm sure, as we go back to school full time in fall.
Thank you. And it is really those transition points. You're right. The 8th to 9th and the 5th to 6th. And thankfully we have Eric here working very closely with the 6th grade teachers already this spring on their curriculum and how they can work on that acceleration, go a little bit deeper and continue to move forward. So I feel like our teachers have a lot of support and that we're all learning and working together towards that goal.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I'm sorry I'm on the phone this evening. Is there, my computer's just not working. Is there any thought to providing more support on the elementary level? I know during budget season, we did hear our elementary principals say that they would love more math support.
In terms of people, like in terms of bodies?
With math coaches, that was a discussion we had last year. Perhaps in the classroom, programming. I mean, we could definitely get more feedback from them, but I know that they had mentioned more math support for the students.
Do you want to go, Dr. De Silva?
Yes. One of the thoughts that we've had, not necessarily just at the elementary level, Rachel, I think the conversation around math interventionists wasn't necessarily this budget year. I think it was the prior budget year, just before I came. But it definitely lingered into the spring, and perhaps some of the discussion around whether or not we needed more support at the elementary level. One of the ideas that we've been having around COVID specifically, and this is truly an idea that we haven't fully fleshed out. But what we do believe is that we have to, keeping, the underpinning of what Corey mentioned around, what's the unfinished learning, if we could just for a second put learning loss to the side, but give kids an opportunity to come to school the first quarter, right, 45 days, teach as we've discussed, and then assess. And from there, identify what are the opportunities that we have to supplement, not supplant a child's day. So we haven't fully fleshed that out, but we have a rare opportunity this year where we do have grant money. It's not a forever opportunity, but it is a rare opportunity. And so as we're thinking about the grant and what our goals might be, we're also thinking about, after our first assessment period, what is the data that we're seeing, and then what are the supports, whether it's elementary, middle, or high, that we need to provide for kids. And ultimately, we only have kids, we know we only have kids during the school day, but if we can provide an opportunity to supplement that school day for kids at the morning or at the tail end of the day, where it's necessary, we'd like to be able to programmatically design something, but that is a very early idea. At this point, I don't know that we're in a position to say that we need more math support. I think once we have a really clear criteria
Yes.
for students, we do have a primary resource in mathematics, and I don't want to step on Linda's toes yet. I know that will be a conversation in the upcoming year. That resource is very old. I think we're using a resource from 2013, and that is actually not a consistently applied resource, and for lots of different reasons. And there's some supplemental resources that I know we use. So that's for a future discussion. But in the meantime, the critical piece is really having a good idea of what our children's needs are, and then staffing around those needs, as opposed to just staffing without a full picture. And again, this year is one of those rare years that we do have the benefit of some grant money so that we could create a structure if we needed to outside of the school day.
And if I can add to that, Rachel, I feel like the work that Eric and Linda are setting up really does provide the school-based teams with support and calibration and help in making sure that we have assessments and that we have criteria. So after the first trimester, like Dr. De Silva is saying, we have people in place to help the teams at the schools decide what their need is at this point. We don't have enough data to know what we're going to need yet next year, but I feel like everybody is primed and ready to deal with whatever comes our way. And Dr. De Silva just shared one possibility that may come up. We may not need to do that, or we may be able to do something amazing like that in different targeted ways. We're not sure exactly where the targets are going to be needed across the different levels, but we're prepared to deal with them as we discover them.
Because your question, Rachel, happened to be tailored towards mathematics, which, in Ridgefield has always, or at least for the past, 5 years, has bubbled up as perhaps an area of need. But ultimately, we don't really know if that's going to be the greatest need, or if there'll be another need that might ultimately bubble up towards the top as more important. And it's simultaneously to that, we have some good things happening around early literacy. And I'm hopeful that all of those things in coming into play, at the start of the year, or at least the phonemic awareness piece starting at the start of the year, will benefit our students greatly.
Well, I really appreciate both of your insights on that and the framework for thinking, and thank you, because I think that sounds really fair, and I appreciate it as a board member, so we can kind of know where we're going. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other questions about unfinished learning and then the math focus? That was our example for unfinished learning and how we're paying attention. So it's similar across literacy, but this was an example. And the math lab at the high school is not just, hopefully, for unfinished learning. We're going to see how it goes. And, the good thing is math people are going to make sure we have really good data to see how the programming works. But we know that there is 100% a need for it in the 8th to 9th transition, and algebra is foundational. So we know all of that to be true. So this is a great year to try it and see how it goes. And we're very excited that it's looking like we're going to be able to do it without adding any FTE, and that students will be with their own classroom teachers and regularly be meeting with Eric to think about how best to deliver that curriculum to students and tailor it to the current algebra course that they're taking. So we're really excited about that. Okay, so 2 more things.
Are we ready for plans for fall? Who's taking that one? You?
Yeah, I'm going to start it.
Yeah, okay.
So we have shared with you Doug Fisher's ideas about unfinished learning and unexpected learning. And when we are looking into the fall and thinking about coming back and transitioning back, rebounding back, we definitely want to be a district that comes back with new eyes, and that as we're moving through the year, not only are we paying extra special attention to our students, but we're thinking about what we learned, what that unexpected learning was this year for us and for our students, and how we might think or teach differently because of that. Because I imagine when our teachers go back to normal and all the students are sitting there in their normal seats and their normal distance from each other, and they go to open their curriculum resource, they might want to play around with asynchronous learning sometime. They may want to try some things that are different. So one of the things that we're going to be thinking about and looking into next year and studying with experts is that idea of rebounding and rethinking some of our methods. And of course, the other thing that we talked about was the systematic work that we've done around organizing the curriculum and the common use of the website and the building of a vision in the especially 612 content areas and short-term and long-term goals. So that will be part of our work in the fall, is bringing all the teachers back together and making sure they all have access and understand how to use that website, because I'm sure you all know you can make something super pretty, which we did. We can make a good website, the three of us, but it doesn't matter if it's pretty if nobody's using it. So we have to make sure that we create something that's implemented and useful for teachers, a place to hold that living curriculum. So that will also be a part of that work. So Linda's going to talk a little bit specifically about the elementary level coming back in the fall.
So I'm going to continue what Dr. De Silva was just talking about in terms of our focus with early literacy. You've heard us speak about phonemic awareness and how we are going to be implementing a common curriculum resource, PK, through grade 1. So what we have planned for one of our opening days is to have a staff developer from Heggerty work with our teachers in PK K1 in the core curriculum for Heggerty. And then we'll also have sessions for our special education teachers and speech and language therapists, where they're going to receive 2 workshops, one in Heggerty phonemic awareness for the core curriculum, so they understand what's happening in the general education setting. And then they'll also receive a second workshop with Bridge the Gap, which is the intervention program that complements the Heggerty phonemic awareness core curriculum materials. If you may remember, Corey and I described those at one of our Board of Education meetings at the beginning of May. And then also in terms of phonemic awareness, our literacy coaches will continue to work with our teachers to support the implementation of phonemic awareness in all 6 elementary schools. So that's really going to be the through line for PK, K, and 1, is supporting the implementation of phonemic awareness. So what we call job embedded PD, if you will, coaches will be working alongside our teachers, our students in their classrooms at grade level meetings. And then as needed, we'll circle back to it at our district days in November and in February. And then I think I also mentioned at a Board of Ed meeting, we'll also be talking about the implementation process for this phonemic awareness resource at our district literacy meetings. So another way to stay calibrated and provide that equity across the 6 schools is that when our literacy coaches come together periodically, discuss how that implementation is going in our different buildings, and then problem solve as needed. And then, as you know, our phonics cat is up and running, and that's going to continue this fall. We'll set new goals for the fall in terms of how we're going to study and continue that research. As you've heard, we're planning to visit nearby districts to be able to talk with folks who are using the resources, get their insights, and then put our recommendations together so that hopefully we have a recommendation, or do plan to have a recommendation by the end of the first trimester. And then in terms of our other content areas and other grade levels, we're really going to be looking at the curriculum work that we accomplished this summer. We have our curriculum teams that are really groups of teachers working on the curriculum goals that we spoke about earlier. And then we want to make sure that we provide plenty of time and resources for our teachers to unpack, if you will, learn what adjustments were made. Something, may seem as simple as a website, but as Corey mentioned, making sure that teachers become nimble and comfortable with the website and where they can access their materials. They're not going to see a whole lot of new and different there, except for, of course, the early literacy, but just the idea of how to access them and what primary resources to use. And we'll do that kindergarten, actually pre-K. I'm working with our pre-K teachers, excited about that, all the way through 5th grade.
And then just across the departments, we recently did a survey of our teachers about professional development. So we're going to be working with the departments, the essentials and the core content areas, because the two things that they asked for the most were choice and relevance. So we feel like this rebounding work is relevant, but we also want to make sure that departments have an opportunity to put some wishes forwards in terms of their own content related goals, hopes, and dreams that are most relevant to them and where they are in their work as a department. So that's getting ready for the fall. And we are working right now to provide an overview of that work, more detailed, a little bit more detailed, both at the district level and at the school-based level for all of our teachers before they leave for the summer. So they have an idea of what they can expect next year in terms of professional learning. So that's our work on plans for the fall.
And I think finally, a summer bridge update. And I know that's just been
Barely. Yeah.
great.
Summer Bridge. So the most stressful part of Summer Bridge right now has been supplies and getting supplies in time. I know that there's all different supply chains for different reasons have been a little bit backed up. But we have been making our way through. We want to make sure that our kids have the opportunities to make the birdhouses and plant the gardens and all the things that they're doing at the different levels. So there's been a team here, and the directors have been hard at work just making sure that all of the teachers can create this really special experience for kids. And we're getting really close. I really don't want to say out loud how many days because it makes us feel very anxious. But you can expect that at the elementary level that we will all be dressed up in a certain theme on the first day, welcoming our students to Bridge for the first day. So wait and see. Wait and see. I don't want to give it away. And that's all we have for curriculum updates.
Any questions before we close out? First of all, I want to thank, all of you. I mean, amazing, because you folks, particularly Linda and Eric and also Corey, haven't been here this long. And the amount of information and work that's been done is, I feel, not only meaningful, but substantive. So I'm really pleased in the way you're reporting it. And just keep doing that and just keep, it seems like it's all going to benefit our children. And I thank you. And any other
Great
comments? Oh, so that's fun.
He agrees.
Yay.
There's a dog outside. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you
all.
for your support. We appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
I think we can go.